Hello and welcome to the introduction to acoustic blues. If you love blues like I do and you have an acoustic guitar and two hands, we're ready to go to work. I'm going to show you all the basics that you need to know, and all I'm going to expect is that you know a few things about the guitar, a few basic chords. If you don't know these things, there's a video you should check out which is called the Ultimate Beginner Series Guitar Basics Step 1 and Step 2. That'll get you going on the instrument. And then in this video we'll concentrate on the style. Now acoustic blues has a long tradition. Well, obviously before there was electric, there was acoustic. And electric's been around for about 50 years at this point, and you listen to the radio, watch TV, seems like electric guitar kind of rules the world, but acoustic guitar has a long tradition of its own, and it influenced the electric. There were some great guitar players in the 1920s. Lonnie Johnson, Blind Lemon Jefferson. Of course, everybody's heard of Robert Johnson in the 1930s, and it continues right up to this day. Everybody still loves acoustic guitar. It's got a special sound, and so we're going to learn how to bring the most out of the instrument. All right? Now to get started, first thing we have to do is tune up together. I'm going to play my strings for you one at a time, and you tune your guitar to mine. All right? We'll start with the high E. Here we go. Here's the B string. The G string. Now here's D. The A string, and the low E. Now once your strings are all in tune, pick a nice open chord like E. Play it. Make sure everything sounds good. All right? Now if you're all tuned up, we can get down to business. Let's talk a little bit about the guitar itself. Now, if you're watching this video, I think it's safe to assume you have an acoustic guitar, but they come in all different varieties, and as you'll see right here, this one is actually an acoustic electric. You probably can't see this part here, but there's some knobs and controls there that actually take the pickup, which is in the bridge here, send it out through a wire. You can play it through an amplifier, but it also sounds good just coming off the top of the instrument. It's like a normal acoustic. Another thing that makes this guitar different is the cutaway, which allows you to get very high on the neck. But as far as I'm concerned, if I want to play high on the neck, I'll probably play an electric guitar instead. It's designed for that. Acoustic sounds better in the low position. That's where you get the open strings, and it really brings out the whole sound of the instrument that makes it special. Now, in addition to the guitar itself, strings are a big factor. And when you buy your first guitar, an acoustic guitar, chances are it's going to have some pretty heavy strings on it. And I think there are a lot of people that have been discouraged from playing the instrument just because of the feel of it. You put your hands down there, try to press the strings down. Sure enough, you get blisters. Eventually you get calluses, but even before you get to that point, a lot of people quit. If the strings are too heavy, if you're having trouble pressing them down, you might want to go to your music store and ask if they have a lighter gauge, because you can get fairly light acoustic strings now, and they'll make your life a lot easier, especially when you're starting out. I use them myself because I'm used to playing electric, and so I don't want to have to struggle when I play this instrument, and they sound just as good. Now the other thing that you need to know about is you got your strings, you got your instrument, you got to make some sound somehow. And a lot of acoustic guitar players use bare thumb and fingers like this. Right? Finger picking or just strumming. Right? Now that sound has a real charm. It's intimate, it's warm, it's the skin striking the string, and there's no replacement for that. And a lot of players will use that, and even with this video, you can use the thumb and finger approach if you want to. I'm going to suggest, however, that you use a pick, and the reason for that is that you get much more dynamic range. That is, you can go from soft to loud, and you'll have a lot more control over individual notes. Now, when it comes to picks, even there's a lot of choices. Right here, for instance, I've got a thumb pick. This is something a lot of players use as a kind of a compromise between bare fingers and a regular pick. And as you notice, it just clips right onto the thumb there. And what that allows you to do is play bass notes. Right? So the bass notes come through nice and clearly. You can also grip it like a regular pick. For some players, it's hard to get used to the feeling of having this thing stuck on your thumb all the time, and also using the bare fingers on the high strings gives them a distinctly different sound. Some players, for that reason, will also use finger picks, but then we get into a very specialized area of finger picking, which is not really going to be what we talk about in this video. So I'm going to suggest, if you don't have another option already in mind, that you use a flat pick like me, and this is just an ordinary, everyday flat pick that you can pick up in any music store, anywhere. Now, even with flat picks, they come in different varieties. I've got 3 different kinds of flat picks here. They're all the same shape and size, and I recommend that you don't get one that's too big. It's hard to control. The only difference between these picks is the weight, in other words, how thick the picks are. The one that I usually play is pretty thick, and as I try to bend it, it doesn't bend very much. This one here, this is a thin pick, and watch this. I can practically bend it in half, right? Now, what difference does that make? Well, when you play with a thick pick, you get the loudest sound from the instrument. When you play with a thin pick, hear the difference? There's a lot more high end, and that is that the sound of the pick comes out more. You can hear the pick striking the strings, and when you're strumming, it gives you a nice, controlled, even sound. The problem with very thin picks is that when you go to play single notes, they sound kind of weak. So I tend to opt more for the heavy pick. There's also a medium gauge pick right in the middle, and get a kind of a nice strum. And the single notes come through as well. So it's a choice that you have to make, and it's worth a little experimenting. They're pretty cheap, so you can afford to do that, all right? Try out a few and see what you like, all right? Now, once you've settled on a pick, and I'm going to stick with my, my heavy gauge pick here, as far as holding the pick, it's really a natural thing. I mean, you don't hold other stuff like this in your daily life. You have to kind of learn a technique, but just take the pick, let your hand flop, and stick it in between your thumb and forefinger like that, and there it is. And hold it just tight enough that it doesn't fly out of your hand, but don't grip it too tightly, because that'll cause you to tense up, and it'll make the sound of your playing, the feel of your playing change as well, all right? So now we got the guitar, we got the strings, we got the pick. I think we're just about ready to get going. Acoustic guitar players in any style spend most of their time down close to the nut, and the reason is that you want to make use of the open strings as much as possible. The fullest sounding chord you can play on the guitar is this big fat open E chord, and every other chord that you play, you're looking for open strings as a way of making the guitar resonate and bringing out the real richness of the sound. So what we're going to do here when we start playing is we're going to learn all the open position chords. This is kind of a review, keep in mind, as I mentioned. You want to know something about these chords before we get going too far into it. But we're going to review the open position chords and then talk about how they're applied in blues, all right? This first chord here is open E, E major triad. And I'll assume you already know something about how to play this chord, easy to finger. When you play blues, however, instead of playing triads, most of the time you play seventh chords, or actually they're called dominant seventh chords. And what those are is major triads with an extra note added to the chord. And you can add it in a couple of different ways. Almost every chord you play on the guitar, there's different options for how to play it. And I'll show you the ones that I like and that are the most useful. Now to play an E major and turn it into an E7, first thing you do is play the chord and then simply lift up your third finger like that. Leave the other two in place. You hear that? All right. Now the trick there, as you notice when I'm playing it, is to keep your fingers out of the way of the open strings. And this requires that you bring your fingers down vertically. They have to come straight down on the neck. And you want to land them right behind the fret there. That's going to avoid the buzzes and make the chord sound clean. You notice also that my thumb is behind the neck. Later on I'll show you how to get around that one. But for the purpose of playing a nice clean full chord, you need the thumb back there as a pressure point. Okay? Now another way to play the dominant chord is to find another seventh. With the E you've got several options. Here's D up here as well. So I play the chord I just did and add that D on the second string. Now this chord is tricky to play. I've been playing for a long time and I'm having a hard time too. So here's how I get around that one. I'll play the E major triad and add the seventh. Now you hear how clean that is now? You can also put in the high string. The hardest thing on chords like this is keeping your fingers out of the way. You notice how my fourth finger's tilted over like that. It's just a natural thing you have to do in order to get everything to work together. You can play this E chord without playing the high E string as well, and that sounds just fine. Now if you're going to play a blues in the key of E, the one chord, the first chord, is going to be called E7. We know that one. There's two other chords that go into the progression, and those will be A and B. Now just a little side trip here into theory land for about 15 seconds. Every blues that you play is made up of those three chords in whatever key you're in, and the easiest way to remember them is they're called 1, 4, and 5. And the reason they're numbered that way is if you're in the key of E and you count up to the fourth note of the major scale, that's A. If you go up to the fifth note of the major scale, that's B. The same relationship will exist in every key no matter what, and as we change keys I'll check you on that one again, all right? So the 4 chord then is A. Here's an A triad. Now this is, I got to tell you the truth, this is one of the most perplexing chords on the guitar. I can think of at least 4 ways to play it. I've gotten into debates with experienced guitar players about how the right way is to play this chord. I'll show you all of them and I'll show you the one I like, okay? If you study classical music, they'll tell you to use 3 fingers. Right? There's those 3 fingers. Or you can use these 3 fingers. That's kind of hard to do because the fingers are fatter, harder to fit between the frets. Here's another way to play it, which is a partial bar, and then the second finger. That one's kind of tricky because you have to really angle your index finger up and out of the way. Here's one that I like. 1 finger, and forget the high string, right? That's got a big enough sound for our purposes. Now we want to turn that into a dominant chord. Again, we'd do the same kind of thing we did on the E chord, which is to get rid of the octave, replace it with the 7th. There's an A7 chord right there. Here's another A7 chord here. Again, we're adding a second 7th to the top of the chord. And again, here's the one that I like. Right there. It's that first finger bar, second finger on top. It's easy to play. It's got that big sound. All right? So there's our A7 chord. Now, that's the 4 chord in the key of E. The 5 chord in the key of E is B7. Lucky for us, there's only one way to play that most people use, and that's this right here. Right, you notice it starts on the 5th string, 3rd finger there, open, B string, and the F sharp on top. And now we got 3 chords. We can play a blues. Blues in the key of E, and in a minute I'm going to show you how to put those chords together to form a rhythm pattern. Now the other common keys that you hear on the acoustic are the open keys, so-called because you use a lot of open strings. So the second most common key is probably the key of A. We already know how to play an A7 chord, and if I want to play the other chords in the key of A, then I go to the 4th note, that's D. There's a D7 chord, you know the D triad. To make it a D7 chord, you replace the D with C, finger it like that. That's a pretty easy one. And then the 5 chord in the key of A is E again. So we got a familiar chord. So if you want to play blues in the key of A, you've got A7, D7, E7, and A7 again. Now the third very common key on the guitar, open position, acoustic, is the key of C. It's a key that a lot of people play because it's easy to sing in the key of C. Of course, on the piano, the key of C is the home key. And on the guitar, it's very convenient too. You start out with the open C chord. Right. Now to make that into a dominant chord, easiest way to do it is add your fourth finger on the third string. And now you have C7. That's a voicing that a lot of people use, and the advantage of that voicing as well is that if you play just the inner four strings, you can move it around. Right? So that becomes a movable chord, and we'll talk more about that. All right? So there's C7. Now the fourth chord in the key of C is F. F is a chord that always presents complications for guitar players because you can't really play F in the open position, unfortunately. We have to play all fretted strings on the F chord. And this is the first bar chord that most people learn, and unfortunately the F bar chord is the hardest bar chord there is to play on the guitar. And this causes people to get frustrated and give up. All right? We don't want to do that. So I'll show you a way to play F that's a little bit easier. This is called a partial bar. And what you're going to do is bar the top two strings with your index finger like this, and then your second finger here, oops, and third finger there. All right? So there's an F triad. All right? Want to make that an F7 chord, I go like that. Now that is a tricky chord to play, and it's going to take some time to really feel comfortable with that one. All right? You have to have your thumb securely behind the neck. You really need to press it down there. Right? But that's a partial bar. Now I'm going to show you one more option, which we'll come back to again, and this is one I like. It's going to feel weird, but it sounds great. It's this. Check out what I just did. I hung my thumb over the top. Now I was telling you keep it behind the neck. In this case, no. Use your thumb to play the root. Play that partial bar. It swings your whole hand around so that you're kind of gripping the guitar like a baseball bat. And you get the advantage of that low note. So now the F sounds nice and full, just like the open chords. So we're going to work with that option a little bit when we start playing some patterns. All right. Now the fifth note in the C scale is G. G chord, this is probably one of the first chords you learned on the guitar, was this one right here. Right? Nice and easy to play. When people finger the open G chord, they finger it in one of two ways. This is one possibility with the second finger, first finger. Some people use the third finger up here. This is a fingering that's better, and I'll show you why. Fourth finger, third finger, second finger. Right. At first that may seem awkward, but here's why it's better. You want to play G7? There it is right there. Right. The first finger plays the F on the high string, and now you have a nice full G7 chord. All right, so finger your G like this, your G7 is right next door. So now we have C7. We have F7, and we have G7. And now we can play the blues in the key of C as well. Well, now that we've got all the raw materials to play blues in 3 different keys, let's talk about how we're going to take those chords and put them in the right order. There are several different blues progressions that are popular depending on the song, but the one that's by far the most popular, it's been around for about 100 years now, is called the 12-bar blues. Now a bar, in most cases, is when you tap your foot 4 times. There's 4 beats to a bar. So we're talking about 12 groups of 4, 12 bars. And when you play a 12-bar blues, you're going to take those 3 chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, and arrange them in a certain order that's almost always the same. There's some variations, but this is the way it's done most of the time. Now we're going to start with the E chord. We'll play in the key of E for starters. There's my E chord and my E7 chord. Now I want you to play along with me, and we're going to put these chords to work right now. And I'm going to show you a rhythm pattern just to start off with here. And this will help get your hands acquainted with the chords and be able to make the changes on time. We're going to go like this. Right, that's called the bass chord accompaniment, obviously. There's the bass note and there's the chord. Now there's two reasons why that's a good way to play. One is that when you hit that bass note and then the chord, you bring out the full sound of the instrument. The second one is that when you hit that bass note, it gives your hands a chance to get to the new chord shape, like this. Here's E, here's A. All right, see that? Here's E. Now while I hit that bass note, it gives my fingers a chance to get settled on the shape, and so it makes the chord changes sound smoother. All right? So we're going to use that pattern. Get your hands set for the E7 chord. And I'm just going to count the chords for you as we go, and I'll tell you when to make the changes. All right? So be ready with E, A, and B. Here we go. 12-bar blues in E. 1, 2, 3, 4. E, 3, 4. Again. Here's the third bar, 3, 2, 3, and now the fourth bar. Here comes the A chord. Play 2 bars on A, 3, back to E. Here comes B. 1 bar on B. Here's A, and back to E. Play B at the end, and stop. Now, I did a little trick at the end there. I didn't play a full bar on the B chord. I played 2 beats on the B chord. Let's wind that back again for a second. I played E, 3, 4, 1, 2, B, and back to E. Okay? Now that part of the tune, that's in the 12th bar. That's called the turnaround, and we're going to come back to that. That's a very important part of the progression. But for right now, all you got to remember is you play those 12 bars, and in the very last bar, it's 2 beats of the 1 chord, 2 beats of the 5 chord. Then you're ready to go back and start the whole thing again. Now let's play a blues in A. Put our 3 chords to work in the key of A, starting with A7. We're going to use the same rhythm technique. Okay? Here we go, starting with the A chord. 2, 3, 4, A. Here's the third bar. 1, 2, 3, and the fourth bar. Here comes D7 now. Back to A. 5 chord E. Now D, and back to A. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now when I'm stopping on that last chord there, that's also the beginning of the next progression. If we want to keep playing, we just keep playing that 12-bar cycle over and over again. As long as you play blues, that's going to be a big part of your life. Now let's play it in the key of C. We're going to start with the C7 chord. Now remember, the challenge here is going to be able to play that F chord and play it clean. All right, that's a challenge for me. Let's try it. Here we go. Starting with C7. 2, 3, 4. C. 2, 3, 4. Here comes F. Have mercy. Back to C. I think we got it. Here's G. F. Back to C. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, G, C. Have mercy. We just played blues in 3 different keys, and you know the 12-bar progression, and pretty well ready to go. There's just one more little thing I'm going to mention to you right now. It's a variation on the 12-bar. It's extremely common. I'll do it back in the key of E. Remember how we played 4 bars on the 1 chord, then we shifted to the 4 chord? This one's a little different. We play 1 bar on the 1 chord, then we play 1 bar on the 4 chord, and then we go back to the 1 chord again. It sounds like this. Here's the E chord. 1, 2, go right to A, and back to E. And then we shift over to A like we did before, and the rest of the progression is identical to what we've already played. Now that change, when you go to the 4 chord in the 2nd bar, that's called the quick change. And blues will fall into 2 varieties: the slow change, which is the first way we played it, and the quick change, which is that one right there. Every time we play a progression, I'll tell you up front whether there's going to be a slow change or a quick change. Now right now you got all the stuff happening that you need to play a 12-bar blues in each of those 3 keys, and all we need now is just to start working on different rhythm patterns and start building up the vocabulary of licks and phrases that are going to make it really sound like blues. It's amazing what a little bit of rhythm will do to make those chords sound good. I'm playing the same exact chords that I've been showing you. All I did was change my right hand pattern a little bit, and you'll also notice that I did a little thing there with the left hand. This is how we're going to start building our rhythm patterns, is starting with the full chord shape and then break it down bit by bit to find out where the melodies are in there, because that's what's going to make the chords sound good. All right? Now, talking about rhythm for a second, when I was showing you the chords and we played together, without mentioning it, we naturally fell into what's called a shuffle groove. Now, a shuffle groove is a groove that's very special to blues. And what it is a very relaxed feel. And let me show you what a shuffle groove is here. I'll play it on the guitar, okay? Sounds like this. That doesn't sound like anything particularly special. It's easy to play, right? But there's something very particular that's going on here, right? What I'm doing is breaking the beat down into 3 parts. At the tempo we're playing, it's a little hard to hear that, but if I slow it way down, it sounds like this. You hear that? All the notes are not even. Got that kind of lopsided, loping feel. That's a shuffle right there. What that means is the first note is longer than the second note in each beat. And I'm breaking the beat into 3 parts. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Those all 3, and there's the shuffle. Now it feels comfortable, back porch, relaxed. It's the feel of blues. It's a natural feel to play. It's important, though, to know that it's different from what they call straight 8th notes. That's where you divide the beat into 2 parts, which sounds like this. Hear how different that is? That's straight 8th notes. Right, it has a whole different feel to it. The shuffle again. Now, when we play blues, we're going to be playing shuffles almost all the time. There are some great blues tunes that use straight 8th notes and all different kinds of rhythm feels as well. But the basic feel in blues is the shuffle. So we're actually playing a 12-bar shuffle. And we're going to start off in the key of E. What I played for you at the front there was this. Now that combines the bass chord rhythm with a little, what you might call an embellishment, adding and taking away the 7th of the chord. Right? I'll play it for you slowly. It's this. Right? Now you notice I'm holding down the E major chord there, adding my 4th finger to play the 7th, and then taking it away to reveal that open string, and that creates a melody inside the chord. Also in my right hand, instead of playing just the straight bass chord accompaniment, I'm now playing doubled up bass notes. My right hand's moving in a steady up and down pattern. The key to rhythm playing in blues in any style, especially on the acoustic guitar, is to loosen up your right hand. You strum the instrument. You don't really pick it. You let your right hand swing free. And part of the technical problem is the freer your right hand is, the more controlled your left hand has to be. You really got to clamp those notes down there and know what you're playing. All right? So again, play along with me. It doesn't matter really what notes you hit, because they all work. It's just a subtlety of aiming the pick at the low strings or the higher strings. And with a little practice, it becomes very natural. Now let's take a look at the A7 chord. Okay, if I play the same pattern I was playing on E in my right hand, it sounds like this. Aiming at that fifth string there, the open string. Have to be careful not to hit the sixth string if I can avoid it, because that'll muddy up the sound of the chord. So I'm hitting the fifth string, that's my root, and then strumming the top part of the chord. Now you notice I don't have the same melody going on in the chord. When I take away my second finger, I get a different note, and it's a nice note, right? But let's see if we can dress that one up a little bit. This is a tricky little shape right here. We learned this one already, and I said I didn't like this one as much as the other one because it's not as easy to finger. And the reason is you really have to crowd your fingers in there and keep them very vertical. It's a challenging chord to play. And what we're going to do is create a melody on top of that chord, like this. You hear that? Right? Now notice what I'm doing. I've got my fourth finger playing the G, and then I move it down a fret, and then reveal the open string. So now I've got a three-note melody going on, playing my bass note and the melody. Sounds like this. Right. Back to E. Now on the B chord, there really isn't much you can do with your fingers because they all have to stay in their position in order to sound like you're playing B. Right? So we can just hit the bass note and strum that chord a couple of times. Since the B chord only lasts for one bar, there really isn't much time to have to work on a melody either, and it'll sound good in context. So we're going to go from B, back to A, and then E. Wind it up with that B at the end, all right? Here's the whole progression. You play along with me, all right? Here we go, nice and relaxed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here comes A. B. Yeah, now that sounds pretty good. I like that. It's full, it's got some feel to it, and it's very relaxed. If you find yourself tightening up, if your right hand is struggling, left hand is struggling, just slow it down. Take your time. Work on the fingerings. You're going to get grooves in your fingers. I got them too, right? And if it hurts, if your hand cramps up, just take a minute and relax, right? Now what I'm doing there is the equivalent to what I did on the A chord. I'm moving my melody note down using my fourth finger, keeping the rest of the chord clamped in position. So there's E, E7. I move that note down a half step. So the fourth finger's doing all the work in that chord. The other fingers stay right in position. What I get is an extra melody note. Let's do another thing. Let's make this into a quick change in the key of E. All right? Remember the quick change? Go to the A chord, 4 chord in the second bar. Now it'll sound like this. All right? Then we go back to the A chord and E. That's a nice variation. When you put the quick change in, since the chords are moving more rapidly, it makes the progression sound more interesting. And the combination of the moving chord and the moving melody means you have a pretty full rhythm part going on. This could work as a rhythm part for a singer, or it could just be you know, a part all unto itself. And many blues progressions, when you hear them on records, are really not much more complicated than that. You can't play too much stuff or you get in people's way. Now we've looked at dressing up the chords using melody notes, embellishments. Let's look at another way of dressing up the chords and also linking the chords together, and these are bass lines. Very common way to play a blues progression. I'll show you a couple of examples right here. All right, key of E. Now what I'm doing there is really focusing the attention on the lower part of the chord and keeping the same melody that I was using already. And what I'm doing is linking the chord changes together by way of the bass line. Now essentially what I'm doing is leading into the new chord from below. Sounds like this, slow. Right? So when I go from the E chord to the A chord, I'm using the open A string as my entry into the A chord. It gives me that extra half second to position my fingers on the chord shape. And the lead up to it is from the 3rd fret, 4th fret to the open string. Right? This is another big advantage of open keys, is that by using open strings in the bass notes, it gives you a chance to get your hands ready for each new change. So again, with the E chord. Hear how smooth that is? Now when I go back from the A to the E, I've got a couple of choices if I want to use a bass connection there. I can go, right? Now that's kind of tricky. It's the same exact move that I did going from E to A, but I suddenly have to jump my hand into that new position. Right? So I'm going from the open. I have to suddenly sort of lurch my 2nd finger to the 3rd fret there, 3rd finger, and then back to my E chord. Here's another way to do it. Right? Now you notice I went back down. It's a nice connection. So I've got the A chord. My 3rd finger is already ready to go there, and I land on the low E. So now my bass connection using a quick change is this. Same thing. Now going to the B chord, I take advantage again of the open string, A, walking up to that B, back down, E. That little walk up there to the root of the B chord is one that you hear in a million different songs. That's a basic guitar technique. It's a basic part of blues. And all those little connecting lines in there, what they do is start creating that feeling of motion through the progression. All right? Let's play the whole thing in context together, in tempo one time. We'll take it nice and easy. Follow along with me. Here we go. Starting on E. 1, 2, 3, 4. How you feeling so far? Hands feel a little bit cramped? I know mine do. We've covered some ground already, and we're just getting started. I'm going to show you another little thing right now. This is actually, when you're playing electric guitar, this is where most people start. But Just shows you how different the two instruments are. We're starting with the big chords, getting the biggest sound, and then kind of whittling it down, all right? So this is what electric guitar players usually do when they play a blues in E, something like this. Right? You get the idea. It's nice, compact, it's muted. It's not big and open and ringing. It's kind of small, but it's very rhythmic, right? So let's figure out how to do that one too, because that's an essential part of your arsenal, no matter what instrument you play. Now we're in the key of E, of course. In this case, I'm not really going to play a full E chord. There's the full E major, E7. We're going to play just a little bit of it here. 3 notes to be exact. The root, the fifth, and the octave. Now when I say these numbers, I'm again referring to the scale tones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the fifth of the chord, just as it's the fifth of the key. Okay? So there's the E chord right there, and then I'm going to add my third finger like that. This is a pattern that a lot of people call the Jimmy Reed pattern. It's named after the immortal blues guitar player, Chicago blues guitar player named Jimmy Reed. And he played an acoustic guitar, played a harmonica on a neck rack, kind of folk style, and wrote a lot of fabulous, influential blues songs. This is his basic pattern. A lot of people use this. All right, so there's a couple of things technically that are different right away. First of all, I'm adding that second note there. I'm not really playing a bass line yet. Okay, it's just a one-note pattern. I add my third finger and take it away. Add it and take it away. The real difference is in the right hand. Instead of strumming the chords, like I was earlier, I've got my hand clamped down right in front of the bridge there. This is called muting, and this is a standard technique on electric, and it sounds real good on acoustic too, because it gives you that punch. So let the heel of your hand just rest on the strings, roll it over, and when you hit the chord, instead of that, you get that, okay? The notes are shorter, they're punchier. And notice I'm using all downstrokes. Still a shuffle, real even. Let's do the same thing on the A chord. Notice how quick I made that little change there? The fingering is identical, but everything's based off the 5th string. Now back to E. Notice I'm playing a 12 bar here. Here comes B. Now check this out. What is that? That B chord there is a bar chord. It's a movable chord. We could play it in any key. Here we're playing it in B. First finger's on B. Third finger is going to play 2 notes. Notice the finger's kind of bent backwards there. You've got to apply a lot of pressure. And then you reach up with your 4th finger. Now this is tricky for a lot of people, especially when you're just starting out and your guitar has kind of high action, heavy strings. Right? It sounds the same as the other chords, but in practice, what a lot of blues players do in the key of E when they get to the B chord is they don't play the same pattern. They go back to the traditional B7 chord like this. It's easier to play, it has a nice ringing quality to it, and it gives the progression a little variety. Right? And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to start with the E chord, go to the A chord, and then when we get to the B chord, we'll play the open chord. And I'll show you how to do it. You play along with me for now. All right, starting at the top, key of E, 2, 3, 4. Nice and relaxed. 3rd bar, here's the 4th bar. Go to A. Make that shift instant. Back to E. I'll explain that stuff in a second. Now you heard how much it opened up there when we played the B chord. That's a good thing. The B chord is kind of the high point of the progression, so it's okay if it's different. Now, a couple of things I need to explain there. I'm using some upstrokes, and they make it sound kind of more rhythmically happening, right? And here's my accent. right, now when I hit the accent, I'm hitting the 4th and 5th strings with that little upstroke, and that gives us some variety. You can even do it in every bar. Notice how good that feels. Now, another thing about that pattern that's very subtle, but it's also very important, is that all of the notes are not played with exactly the same volume. This is part of picking. And what I'm doing is I'm hitting all the downbeats where I'm tapping my foot, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. When you count it, you naturally say the numbers louder. That's the way you play it too. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. That little accent, as subtle as it is, it gives the whole rhythm that feeling of forward motion. It makes it real strong, right? So combine that with the upstrokes. Get right into it. Now here's another little trick. Check this out. Now that's a real easy one to play, and it uses some stuff we already know how to do. I'm playing the pattern I just showed you. Right? I just lay my second finger flat, almost like I'm playing an A chord with that finger. Hit the open strings and hit the E major triad. I'm not playing a 7th chord in this case, just the triad. Just try that move a couple of times. Notice it's a strum. It's a downstroke, upstroke, downstroke. And now to fit it into the rhythm, I'm even hitting that last upstroke there with the open strings. It's the beauty of the key of E. It's the beauty of the open E chord. You can do all that stuff. You can play open strings, not even playing the chord, and it still sounds good as long as the time is steady. All right. Now let's add all that stuff together. We'll use that little riff on the E chord. We'll play the same rhythm without the riff on the A chord, and we'll use the open B chord and see what we come up with. Here we go. A 1, 2, slow change. Here's A. Back to E. B. Now let me show you another variation here, which is taking this pattern and combining it with some of the bass line stuff that we did earlier. And as you can see, bit by bit, we're starting to build a vocabulary of chord shapes and bass lines. And by the time you put it all together, it sounds pretty complicated, but each part is something you can break down and practice individually. All right, check this out. What you see there is that I'm starting to use those bass lines to connect the chords and using the big chord embellishments as well. So for instance, just going from E to A. Right, that's a natural connection. Play the A chord, back to E. Play the chord, connect it back to A. Let me show you this, right, on the A chord. Same thing I played on the E chord, right? So instead of only using the bass line to connect A back to E, I use a little bass line on the A chord just to dress it up. And then connect. Here's B. Now Now there, I'm using the bass line to connect B to A. Right? That pattern that we just checked out for the A chord there is a nice connection. And then back to E. It's almost like we have a melody or not quite a solo, but a definite idea going on in the bass that's separate from what's going on in the upper part of the chord. All right? Let's play that whole thing together one time. All right? You follow along with me and I'll give you the verbal cues as to where we're going. In the key of E. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. E, connect. A, and connect. Embellish. Connect. Here's the riff on A. And connect. Embellish. B. Connect. Now, just experimenting with those different options once you get the feel is going to give you a lot of new ideas. You have to listen to players, though, to really know how to use it properly and to keep the right kind of attitude. So I highly recommend that you listen to some Jimmy Reed recordings. There's a lot available. Anything you hear is going to do you some good, all right? Now, while we're on the subject of E blues, I'm going to tell you one more thing, and this is about the turnaround. So far, we've been dealing with the turnaround strictly as a little run-up to the B7 chord. In most cases, though, guitar players will tend to play the turnaround in a more complex way. They'll play a lick, in other words. I'm going to show you a lick right now that's a real straight-ahead turnaround lick in E. It sounds real good. Okay, from the 5. Here we go. 2, 3, 4. Check that out. That's a whole chord thing moving down the neck, played over the E chord and then leading up to the B chord. That's a turnaround lick. It's a pretty traditional lick. It's a good one to know, and it's nice on acoustic because using chords makes it fuller. It matches the rest of the sound more completely. I'll show it to you. It's very easy. You're going to use 3 fingers. Third finger on the top string, first finger on the second string, and second finger on the third string. Take that shape, move it down, 1 fret, 1 more fret, and wind up on a regular old E chord. Now I'll finger it the way I showed you. And then you walk up to the B. Right? Once again, I'll play it in tempo from the 5. See if you can play along with me. From the B, 2, 3, 4. I think we've just about worn out the key of E, so let's take some of the ideas that we picked up and move them to the key of A, probably the second most popular key on the guitar, if not the first. It's pretty popular. Now, we've learned all the chords that we need for the key of A. We got the A7 chord, D7 chord, the E7 chord, little variations in fingerings and whatnot. Let's start by playing the chord embellishment idea. Right now, we already did one embellishment on the E chord, the blues in E, that is. When we got to the 4 chord, we played this little riff right here a bunch of times. Let's do a different one, and we're going to use that different fingering in A, the one that I like. At least I can play it without hurting my fingers. This is the bar with the index finger, second finger on the G. And then what this does is it allows your 4th finger to reach up and get the A. You can actually use that straight bar as well. So that's going to be our embellishment for the key of A, or the A chord rather. Now when we go to the D chord, this is one of the few chords like B that only has 1 fingering that people use most of the time. I'm going to show you another one in a minute. But for embellishment, here's what we're going to do. Play the D chord, and then lay your first finger flat. This is the partial bar like we use on the F chord, right? So you bar those top two notes there. Second finger, so far it looks like an F chord, but you add the third finger on top, D chord. And all you're really doing is changing the melody. You're really not changing the chord itself. It's just the melody note. Right? So there's our embellishment on the D chord. So combining A to D, it'll sound something like this. Right? It sounds nice. It's got a nice high-end melody to it. Go back to A. That's a nice one there. Using the third finger in the middle. What that does is make it sound like it wants to go someplace, doesn't it? And where it wants to go is back to the 4 chord. We have our embellishment again. E. And there's our 12-bar blues in A using embellishments. The only thing about that progression in the key of A that seems to be missing, as far as I'm concerned, is that when you go from the E to the D, you notice the jump in the bass note there and in the fullness of the chord. This is the fullest chord there is on the guitar. And this one only has 4 strings. It's a little higher pitched. It seems to lack something. Here's how blues players get around that one. Yeah, check that out. This one goes back a ways. Robert Johnson used this one a lot. You're on the E chord. Now, here's the trick. Now, what note is that? That doesn't seem to have anything to do with a D chord, but in fact, that is the 3rd degree of the D chord. If you start with open D, there's the 3rd note of the D scale. Same note, down an octave. It's F sharp. Now you finger the D chord, but instead of the normal fingering that we were using, you do it like this. Low F sharp, the open D, 3rd finger on A, 4th finger on D. Right? Now, that sounds kind of strange until you hear it in context and you hear the E. There's our embellishment. I'll show you that one. And back up to the A, right? You hear how nice that is? It keeps the bass on the low end in the same register, and it makes the connection from E to D to A very distinct. Let's play the whole 12 bar and use that one, all right? Here's A. Quick change. Here we go. I'm going to show you one more thing in the key of A. We know how to play the chord embellishments. We know how to play the bass lines and experiment around with those. We got this new voicing for the D chord and so on. One thing we're lacking is a turnaround lick. Again, like we did earlier in E, we're just using a flat-out chord there with nothing leading up to it. We need a phrase. I'll show you one right here. This is a real common, good lick to know, all right? Once again, we're key of A. We'll take it from the 5 chord, and I'll demonstrate the lick for you and then tell you how to play it, all right? So we're in the key of A from the 5. 2, 3, 4. Now, what I did there was play a combination of notes on the 2nd and the 4th strings, okay? And I used the same fingers, just moving down the neck. One of those things that just happens to work out on the guitar is that you don't need to use a different shape. You can just slide your fingers along 1 fret at a time. Like the turnaround on E, key of E, it starts on the 2nd beat of the measure, all right? Play along with me real slowly one time. We'll take it from the 5 in the key of E, and we'll use that little fancy bass lick on the D chord too to make it authentic. All right, so from the E, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, did you feel that one? Right? You make sure you're counting it. It's the E, D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Then you're on your 5 chord. Remember, it starts on the 2 beat. And move it down just 1 beat at a time. Very relaxed. Now, a capo, sometimes called a cheater, is a quick way of changing keys without having to learn any new chords. This is an example of a capo right here. This looks very bizarre. There are other styles and types of capos. This one happens to be nice because it clamps onto the neck rather than having to wrench it on with a elastic strap. It's quick and it's very tight. But any kind of capo will do the same job, and the job it does is to move the nut from here to any fret you want, right? Now the beauty of the guitar, as we started off with, is the open strings. Big open sound, right? But suppose you want to play in the key of A flat. Well, that's a problem, because A flat's up in here. There aren't any open A flat chords. To the rescue. Take the capo, whatever style you use, works the same way. You clamp it across the strings, right behind the fret of the key that you want to play in. You want to play in the key of A flat. A flat is at the 4th fret, so you clamp the capo at the 4th fret. Form your hand in the shape of the open E chord. Bingo. That's an A flat chord, right? Because the capo is now the thing that stops the strings from ringing, just as the nut originally formed that function. So you want to play blues in A flat? Here we go. You get the idea. Anything that I can do in the open position, key of E, I can now do in the key of A flat. It sounds different. The strings are higher, but it's the same shapes, the same patterns. It's a very famous picture of Robert Johnson, as a matter of fact. There's only 2 photographs that are known to exist, and in one of them you can see a big fat old capo hanging right off the neck. So it's been around for a while. It's a great trick. So what do you think? You got a couple of new ideas you can use? I hope so. Every time I play this style and just start improvising, I seem to stumble across something I never did before. And listening to the history of this style of music going back to the 1920s, you're going to hear an amazing amount of guitar playing. You think it was all invented in the 60s, you're wrong. It goes way back. And so this is an introduction to the technique. We started with our open position chords. We built 12-bar blues in 3 different keys. Learned about bass lines, learned about embellishing chords, connecting chords, making up different kinds of rhythm patterns. And it's getting us ready for the next step. And what that's going to be is learning how to play more melodies, how to solo, and finally, how to accompany yourself, how to finger pick and how to play melodies at the same time that you play a bass note, all right? Might sound pretty complicated, but I'll show you a few tricks that'll get you through it, okay? So I hope you had fun with this one. Go back, rewind it, check it out again, right? Build up those calluses. I'll see you on the next one.